With the National Broadband Network rollout to commence in Tasmania very shortly, tonight's lecture will hone in on how technology can be used to conquer challenges for regional Australia. And there is perhaps no better person in the world to talk about that topic tonight than Professor Larry Smarr. Professor Smarr is recognised across the globe as an internet visionary. He is the founding director of the California Institute for Telecommunications and Information Technology. He is a Harry E. Gruber Professor in the Jacobs School Department of Computer Science and Engineering. Dr. Smarr is a pioneer in the prototyping of a national information infrastructure to support academic research, government functions and industrial competitiveness. It is our great pleasure to welcome Professor Smarr to Tasmania to deliver this, the inaugural Joseph Aloysius Lyons Lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Professor Larry Smarr.
Thank you very much. It's quite exciting to be here at this moment when Tasmania has been given the lead for all of Australia in the largest infrastructure project in the history of the country. And I've spent all day in discussions with people here about how Tasmania can take this unprecedented moment and translate it into some of the goals that we heard earlier tonight expressed. There's always hope, and the hopes are dashed, and then there's hopes again, and those are dashed. So why am I optimistic about this? Well, you've been on the island. The island's been here for a very long time, and this is an island of an island which has been here for many tens of millions of years. That physical aspect that defines Tasmania and Australia has not changed in human history. But there's a new geography of cyberspace, and in cyberspace there are no oceans unless you self-impose them by cutting yourself off from the bandwidth that interconnects more and more the entire world. And so this will transform Tasmania and Australia. There's no question about it, because the global economy is now more and more taking place in cyberspace. And so I'm going to just, in the next half hour, try to give you a sense of what's coming to town, as it were, over the next year. You're going to light up the NBN by July of next year, the first places in Australia. Now, where did I get into this business of optical fibers and their transformational character? Over 10 years ago, I had spent the previous 20 years in Illinois, in East Central Illinois, as we call it, surrounded by corn, with a small little university town. And there we built one of the first national supercomputer centers, and in hooking those centers up, developed what eventually became known as the commercial internet today, and the web basically came from this in the early 90s. And so we, the governor, liked the fact that we got all this federal money for the supercomputer, and then we got all this money from, and notoriety from helping give birth to the web. And so in about 98, he came to me and he said, "So Larry, this is great. What's next?" And so I thought a while, and I said, "Well, I think it's fiber optics." And we convinced him to take the initiative, much like what Tasmania is about to go through, of putting the first government-owned optical fiber throughout Illinois. And in his State of the Union, State of the State message in 1999, he pointed out that infrastructure is what made Illinois, otherwise out in the middle of the Great Plains of the United States, the great power in economics that it became. It had always been a crossroads. It was the location and the infrastructure that allowed goods and ideas to move faster and faster, starting with the canals and rivers, then with the railroad, Chicago being the hub, then O'Hare Airport, the air traffic hub. But in each of these transitions of infrastructure, Illinois strategically understood it had to maintain that hubness. And he pointed out that this 21st century coming up, the new medium isn't going to be water, steel, or air, but information. And he therefore put in place with the legislature the first of the 50 states in the United States, just like Tasmania, will be the first state in Australia to put this fiber optic network in place. And that was 10 years ago. Well, that led to 25 of the states at least now having their own fiber network, and to the national fiber optic network called the National Lambda Rail that links together all these state networks. But rather than the 100 megabits per second that seems unimaginable, what would you do? I mean, you've got a megabit at best. My hotel here is a very nice hotel, lots of artwork on the walls, and less than half a megabit per second internet access. That's coming into me. Going out, it's dial-up modem speed. Now, if I were a business person and I had a lot of stuff to do, this is a beautiful hotel, but I can't do my business in that environment. And I think this is why it's so important. Everywhere you go now, connectivity is everything. This is 10,000 megabits per second, not 100, the individual channels on the fiber optics. So when I got here, I felt right at home, because the first thing I did was read The State of the State by Premier Bartlett, and lo and behold, I've heard this before. So again, the infrastructure, in this case of hydro, for Tasmania is what underpinned the economy, but its future will be tied to our ability as a state to stay connected in a fast-paced, changing world. And the telecommunications infrastructure will be to the 21st century what the dams, poles, and wires of hydro were for the 20th. So you can see that that's 10 years later, almost exactly recapitulating the message that the governor of the state I was in was making. You've got a lead in this. You've had a test bed here, the first in Australia of its scale, the Tasmanian Cooperative Optical Test Bed. That experience had a lot to do with why you were selected by the federal government to take the lead for Australia in deploying the NBN. So building on your prior successes. And you can look at the applications, the internet, telephone, TV, the beginnings of video conferencing, and so forth. But there's good economic news. The reason that the Red government put this in place when it did was you need stimulus. Your country needs stimulus, just as our President Obama is doing this in the United States. And these are the numbers as estimated by the local Department of Economic Development. You know, a good fraction of $1 billion in capital works, another $500 million to support infrastructure, 800 to 1,000 jobs created during the construction, and many international companies who would normally never come to Tasmania for economic reasons are coming here to get experience because you're the point of the spear for the country, and so that they can sharpen their skills to then go sell into that world of fiber to the home all over the place.